Why did Italy switch sides in World War II? The downfall of Mussolini, which is super important because we're about to find out live in Hoi 4, My Blood Alone. So, let's go.
After the March on Rome in October 1922, Benito Mussolini became the youngest Italian prime minister up to that date. The Italian dictator was aware that Italy was not ready for a long conflict, based on its resources and its pre-World War II smaller military interventions in Ethiopia, Albania, and Spain.
One of the reasons for the rise of Mussolini in Italy is because Italy had territorial demands it wanted at the end of World War I, and it barely got any of them. I guess Germany's an exception of that, isn't it? Like losing a war, therefore wanting specifically revenge as such.
On the 28th of October, Mussolini issued an ultimatum to Greece, demanding the cession of Greek territory. The Italian army invaded Greece on the 28th of October before the ultimatum had expired. The ineffectiveness of the Italian army was visible, thus the invasion was truly a disaster. 140,000 troops encountering a well-determined enemy. The fight was mainly on mountainous terrain on the Albanian-Greek border. What was expected as a pretty quick success was instead a failure. By mid-November, the Greeks had stopped the Italian invasion, and after that pushed away the enemy back to Albania. Finally, Italo-German forces had achieved victories against Greece and Yugoslavia, and had occupied parts of British-held Egypt on their push to El Alamein after their victory at Gazala. However, Italy's conquests were heavily contested. Even if Yugoslavia and Greece were defeated, large partisan movements existed here and created large difficulties for Axis forces. After the struggle in North Africa, Mussolini requested help from his German ally. By May 1943, the Allies managed to defeat the Axis forces in North Africa. And new plans were to be made.
The soft
Even
underbelly.
before their victory, a disagreement among the Allies existed. The British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, focused on the naval power of Britain, and his plan was to create well-pointed, small operations in order to weaken the enemy.
One thing I hasn't touched on here is the state of the Italian Navy at this point, because they can only assert power in these seas that they home coast to if they have a strong navy, but it's not been mentioned that much, has it?
The elimination of Italy would enable Allied naval forces, principally the Royal Navy, to dominate the Mediterranean Sea and possibly create a bigger southern front. Italian divisions on occupation and coastal defense duties in the Balkans and France would be withdrawn to defend Italy, while the Germans would have to transfer troops from the Eastern Front to defend Italy and the entire southern coast of France, thus aiding the Soviets. A combined Allied invasion of Sicily began on the 10th of July, 1943, with both amphibious and airborne landings. The land forces involved there were the U.S. 7th Army under Lieutenant General George S. Patton and the British 8th Army.
So the new Hoi 4 mechanics is if any Italian core territory is occupied, the fascist council will move away from support from Mussolini until it reaches a certain point where it will cause a civil war. And I think what's going to happen here is going to represent the civil war that would happen in Italy. However, it doesn't happen historically like that. I think Italy just flips entirely to supporting the Allies, and then Germany invades them. So it's not quite a civil war, but it'll be interesting to see how it performs in the normal game.
The defending German and Italian forces were unable to prevent the Allies' capture of the island, but they succeeded in evacuating most of their troops to the mainland. Forces of the British 8th Army, still under Montgomery, landed in the toe of Italy on the 3rd of September, 1943.
He's lucky in Hoi 4, that's the hardest place to land that. Pushing over a strait into mountains.
Operation Baytown, the day the Italian government agreed to an armistice with the Allies. The armistice was publicly announced on September 8th by two broadcasts. First by General Eisenhower, and then by a proclamation by Marshal Badoglio, although the German forces prepared to defend without Italian assistance. There had been a hope that with the surrender of the Italian government, the Germans would withdraw to the north.
The bit I want to know is where's Mussolini's involvement in this? Surely he's the head of the government, he's the head of state, right? So surely why would the government overthrow him? Was it the military that overthrew him, kicked him out? Whereabouts is he right now? It doesn't explain that, and this upsets me a bit. I want to know that.
On October 13th, 1943, 1 month after Italy surrendered to Allied forces, it declared war on Germany, its one-time Axis powers partner. Italy was led into the war by Benito Mussolini.
Oh, here we go.
The prime minister who had formed an alliance with Germany in 1936.
So the king and the prime minister overthrew Mussolini. Right, okay.
Mussolini was ousted on July 25th, and his replacement, General Pietro Badoglio, sought peace with the Allies and reached an armistice on September 3rd. Germany, which had troops stationed throughout Italy, proceeded with an occupation of the country and seized strongholds from a disorganized Italian military. Knowing that just a small part of Italy was occupied, why did they switch sides so easily? As it was presented, even if Italy could have been a potential great power, it had many shortcomings, and not only in the military. The army wasn't just poorly equipped with outdated or insufficient weapons, but in some cases poorly trained.
One thing I like about Hoi4 recently is it's more about making choices. Okay, so we have to make a decision who we support. Is it either going to be the fascist party or is it going to be Mussolini? And I kind of like that decision-making skill. Like one gives a bonus over the other, and we have to make a skilled decision depending on who we want to go with. And I feel like that's where Hoi needs to make more of those points. If you're moving your nation towards militarizing, it should pull from civilian production. Or for instance, the opposite. If you're focusing on domestic industry, it should really hurt your production towards military. And it kind of does, because you have to choose between civs and mils. But it's kind of a little bit like black and white. It needs to be more shades of gray, like literally the state either moving towards domestic or military and having bits of pros and bonuses depending on which direction you go. Japan's got that a little bit with the kind of like the fight between the navy and the army, and depending on who you side with, gives you bonuses or penalties. And I kind of like that, and we need more of that.
Although could be considered the main German ally, the country wasn't ready for a large-scale conflict. Their industrial sector was small. The preparedness and training of the soldiers was limited. Large industries were vital in such campaigns. Germany placed a special emphasis on arming and creating industries for tanks, artillery, warplanes, and so on. The Italian army, on the other hand, was poorly equipped for a war against Great Britain or the United States. Italian industries were outproduced in terms of quantity and quality compared to those of its enemies. The situation can be seen even worse if we look at it from a geographical perspective. The country is a peninsula, a large one, with huge coasts to guard. Having an enemy capable of doing amphibious and paratrooper landings in a sea which became less and less dominated by your ships is not a good sign to continue a war. The Navy did its part in the war and was successful in securing its coasts and large parts of the sea. But again, having the lack of proper warplanes in terms of numbers and technology to support the Navy campaigns was a big drawback.
It's not always universally a thing, but building a big navy against Italy is a really good thing because you get shore bombardment, which is kind of the equivalent of air superiority. So of all the nations in the game to invade, to have naval supremacy is kind of a really good idea invading Italy. I guess to a certain degree, maybe Yugoslavia and maybe Greece due to its lots of coastlines. But Italy's prime, like you can cover over 50% of the nation with shore bombardment just by having a good fleet. I feel like in my Hoi4 playthroughs, I feel like I take the least advantage of that, and I really should. Japan and the Philippines too. I feel like if you land troops, though, on mainland Japan, it's already over. But no, you're totally right. Japan and Philippines too.
North Africa could have been seen as a shield between continental Italy and the Allies. The unsuccessful campaign there created the situation for British and American landings in Sicily, and afterwards in the toe of Italy. For much of the political class, it was clear that the Italian forces are dealing with a more powerful enemy, and now the war isn't outside their borders, but within. As the Allies advanced, they encountered increasingly difficult terrain. Allied forces advanced slowly north through the Italian peninsula, before finally defeating Axis forces in May 1945. Mussolini, who was rescued by the Germans from an Italian prison and made the leader of a puppet state, the Italian Social Republic, in parts of Italy not occupied by Allied forces, was captured and executed by members of the Italian partisan resistance.
I wanted a little bit more texture of the government of Italy and the decisions that were made, less about the troop numbers, and I don't know. I feel like there was less texture. I feel like I wanted a more in-depth look of Italy and World War II. Anyway, like and subscribe, boys, if you want more of this kind of content. I love you.